Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. If you're looking for candid, intellectually curious conversations on arts and culture, you found the right place. Today, my guest is a mixed media artist who creates wearable art with a post-apocalyptic influence and created using found objects. Please welcome Adam Droneburg. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you on. And, you know, when I go back to kind of hanging out the Peel that day when we first met, I was like, all right, who's this dude? That's literally what I asked. I asked Jeffrey and I asked Cleo. I was like, where's this dude at? Who is he? Mad Max? What's going on here? But, you know, so that's just a little bit of a taste for the folks listening. I want to dive back in and start off with the very sort of introductory thing. Some people find it to be a challenge. Other people are like, oh, I can do the whole podcast talking about myself. So I want to invite you to, before we get too deep, share your story with us. Where'd you grow up and describe your art background?
So I, as we were mentioning before we came in, I grew up in kind of out in the middle of nowhere up in Frederick. I've been in Maryland my whole life. But I grew up out on a farm. So I kind of from early age, like, it was on a farm, we got by making things work. So from an early age, I had like a lot of experience kind of cobbling things together. And the primary drive was, things just had to work. As I got older, I didn't wind up going to college right out of high school because for some reason, the first day of high school, somebody asked me what I wanted to do. And back at 14, I was just like, I don't know, cop, military, who knows? Like, what 14-year-old has I figured out? But fortunately I went to college. I didn't do any of that. But when I first got to UMBC, I came into UMBC originally for social studies because that's what I was doing in community college. I had a fantastic professor there. And this was also right around the time, Prop 6 and gay marriage was first being legalized. It was like a really interesting time to be in into that field. And then I wound up I didn't like the textbook aspect of it. I really liked being out talking to people. So I got into American Studies, which I got into because there was a class called The Road, and being the little hipster boy that I was, I thought it was based on Jack Kerouac's The Road. So I signed up for it, just completely blind. And it was taught by Dr. Nicole King. And it was all about road movies and their influence, how they were their influence on America, media and culture. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to get my degree in. Yeah. And then I got into the oral history and doing all the audio recording. And through that, it really combined what I like doing, which was like being out in the field, but also I got to do creative editing. And I really had, I had like no hand in art whatsoever. Right. I never fashioned myself as a creative person. I worked outdoors. And I, had jerry rigged stuff all my life, but I never in a creative manner until I started doing audio. And then I got out of undergrad, and like pretty much everybody, we graduated from one financial crisis to the next. And I wound up selling motorcycles, which I absolutely hated. People who work in sales, more power to them, but I hated it. So I wound up going back to Dr. King, who I was close friends with. And she was like, oh, you should look up IMDA, the Intermediate Digital Arts Program at UMBC, and just go deeper into the audio world. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I got started in that and just had no idea, because it was, again, no comprehension of art outside of like one art history class. And I got into this grad program just completely blind. And they saw something in me that I didn't see the first semester, because I had no idea how to translate audio into this like gallery setting. Sure. This long story to make the point. No. I was, but on the side, I started, I'd always made my Halloween costumes growing up. So I kind of had, I didn't know really how to sew, but I knew basically how things had to go together in order to be wearable. And I've always had this like interest in, there was this interest in post-apocalyptic costumes specifically because there was this way about them that there was no point of failure. Whenever I had materials or anything like that in my studio, the IMDA program they provide you with a studio, I was always like terrified to touch anything. I never wanted to start on anything because I was just like, you know, the typical struggling artist. Well, I don't want to buy it again if I screw up. And there's this lovely, like, screw it about post-apocalyptic costuming that is just it is you just keep you can kind of keep just chugging away, and those mistakes you can go back and fix them later, but you don't have to try and erase them. So it was a really good jumping off point for me to like start working with physical materials and not just live in the digital world with audio. Because I just didn't know how to bring sound back out of the computer because I'm not musically inclined. It's all sound effects and stuff like that. And I don't know. It was and this was right before the pandemic. So this was the fall of September 2000. This was the fall of 2019. And so I made the first one. I still have it in my studio. It's not, you know, we all hate our own art. But I had no idea how to explain this to my to the faculty. I was just like, I am this, you know, dark-haired, bearded guy, and if I present this, they are going to think I am some kind of like paramilitary nut job. Like, it's not going to. I have no way of justifying this, and that was also the start of basically how I do my art now is make the thing and justify it later, which wound up working really well, thank God. But yeah, so I had this thing sitting in my studio during our first grad review day, which is like when the entire faculty comes down and looks at your stuff. And I had done, instead of showing that, I had it sitting off to the side, but I had these photos I had taken all these night times where I was like replacing, I was making constellations out of street lights. Yeah. You know, it was like my first freaking attempt at anything like art related. And it was, I had no idea how to explain it. That was my biggest problem, is I didn't know how to explain art back to them. Gotcha. But people kept asking, well, like, what's this in the background? I was terrified to answer that question because, again, like, I don't want you all thinking I'm some kind of paramilitary nut job.
Like, what's this flag I see? Like, what are you doing, sir?
Yeah. And then a couple people asked me about it, and I decided I was going to, I was like, okay, I've got this final project coming up in this other class that I'm in where we have to like, it was very open-ended, but we basically had to like present a piece of work like do it as a media thing or something. So I dragged this thing in, mannequin and all, out to UMBC, and like in true ADHD fashion, like came up with what I was going to say in the car before. And basically I was like, okay, I'm going to present this as if I'm a museum curator and I found this thing like post apocalypse. Like, yeah, this will work. And it freaking worked. And I don't know why it worked, but everybody was like, oh, you should keep doing this. And I think once I had that permission that like, this is not just like, this isn't just Mad Max for the sake of being that, like, you can keep doing this. Mm-hmm. And that was, it really snowballed out of control after that. But that was the jumping off point. You know, it was going in there with absolutely no clue and really just stumbling my way into this.
So, and thank you for walking us through that. Cause it's like, I think going back through and having that sort of like exercise and, you know, expressing like, this is what I do. Cause I troll people sometimes. Well, a lot of times, but I troll people where I'm like, describe what you do, but describe it really poorly. Like, yeah, I talk to people who are smarter than me. It's like, you know, so walk us through that process, but I really want to key in on like where you source the materials and things of that nature, since it is composed of like found objects at times. Okay.
Take a beehive and throw a rock at it. That is my thought process when it comes to this stuff. It is, I am so wildly on either end of the spectrum when it comes to like, I have a plan or I have no plan. It usually always starts with, I get like really inspired by just something randomly in a piece of media. I'm a big video game fanboy. So usually I'll be playing stuff. It's never like the main character. It's like some NPC off the side. I'll see like the corner of a belt. And I'm like, I think I can make that. Or it's like something really like off to the side that I'll catch an eye on. Because everybody wants to be the hero. And you'll see like the first, if you saw in the peel, like I have a couple of like metal, almost like kind of atypical, typical mercenary looking stuff. And I've really been trying to get away from that because it's as every artist says, it's been done. But so what I typically do is I will start with some vague idea of kind of, I'll start with like one key thing I want on the costume, be it like, I'll find like some interesting piece of scrap. Like I have this Atlas Sound, this big, huge metal button that I still am like looking for the right project. I hold on to so many little things that I'm like, this is going to be the centerpiece in a project. And I throw it in a drawer and I forget about it. And I find the next thing is going to be the centerpiece in a project. So I'll start off with like some key thing. So for like the one at the peel, there was the trash can hat.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to make a hat out of a trash can. That's where this thing is going to start. So I typically start with like something physical that will kind of define the overall aesthetic. And then I have to really, I have to really kind of think about this as an actual person. That was what was, as I was going through it, through grad school, is like people kept asking them about, I kept explaining them as characters, not as just individual pieces, but I described them as if they were a person attached. But when I present them, I very much present them as like empty husk for us to climb into. Yeah. But if I give them a job, I give them a role in society that kind of defines what they wear. If you're a merchant or you're selling stuff, you're not going to be rolling around in, heavy armor. You're going to be nomadic, things like that. Very basic things that I think anybody in like story writing would ask, but I have to like actually like put it on a mannequin. Yeah. So that kind of gets the overall aesthetic. So with the trash can lid, I was like, okay, this is, kind of like a trash wizard or like some bizarre merchant. So I'm just going to keep rolling with that. And my mom was like, oh, I have a bunch of old costume jewelry. Do you want that? I'm like, sure. That's how I get a lot of things now, is once people find out you do this kind of thing, it's like, oh, I have all these boxes that I don't want to throw away. Do you want them? You kind of wind up being like a secondary source of recycling. Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of stuff. I had a friend that used to work at Maryland Science Center, so I have a bag of like 500 keys that they were like that don't go to anything anymore. And
that could be chainmail or something.
Yeah, and that's kind of where a lot of it starts. Is like I have to. It's a really weird exercise. Like I walk around the world now looking at things of how I can use them, and it's as if I don't have enough going on in my head. Sorry, I'm like off in the weeds now. So with that, the merchant, that was also one I was designing kind of for a friend because I wanted to like try and like design one for somebody. So I asked him like a couple of basic things, but it was like, okay, I'm gonna, what are things that are interesting or striking? What are things that are commonly available? You can't have a soldier with a frickin' 50 cal. That's not gonna, it's thinking about things that are readily available. Keys. Everybody's got keys in their pockets. There's billions of them. Costume jewelry. I think I have a medical alert bracelet. It's, things that would reasonably exist. And also thinking about how far into this, how much is information broken down that we no longer know what these things are. Which is always fun. Like how can I misinterpret these things? Like the shorts as a hood or the trash can lid as a hat. Little things like that. Like how can I misinterpret them? How can I warp them? I used a circuit board to make an arrowhead. Nice. Because we don't make arrowheads on the daily, but circuit boards are nice and sharp if you break them. And that's the other thing is what could a person reasonably figure out about these things? Like the reason I use metal as armor is not just because we've used it for that in the past, but like we always recognize metal as hard and durable. It sounds kind of like rudimentary, but there's like really weird things I have to think about because I also keep all of these costumes as functional as humanly possible. You know, the light that I have that comes over the shoulder of the one actually turns on and has a supply unit, like a power supply unit that actually works, which is basically a big bomb of a battery on the lower back. So yeah, I it's trying to keep track of all that stuff, and sourcing the material. I will go to military surplus stores again, because I think it speaks volumes that one of the most abundant materials and cheapest materials out there is military surplus. It's incredibly cheap. It's incredibly abundant, and it's durable enough that I can rip it and screw it up and it will still hold together. And then after, you know, I'll look for like pouches, pockets, anything with dimension. Like I said, I usually design around one staple piece. And then a lot of it is me in a mirror holding junk on my body to see how it looks. That's because a lot of this stuff, I'm constantly getting in and out of this stuff in the studio. So that's another thing I have to think about is how hard is this stuff to get on.
Right.
The only piece I consider an actual soldier is the one with the jackalope on it. And that was the only one I designed like military armor, where it is quick to put, it's very secure, but it's rapid release and rapid on, rapid release. It's trying to incorporate those things into function. And that's where I think some of the more interesting looks come about, is trying to make these things functional with stuff that doesn't want to function. Right. None of this stuff wants to go together. And for that, and I didn't know how to sew for the first 2 years I was doing this. I had not a single clue. I think my poor wife tried to teach me like 2 or 3 times, and I just went out of my head. So I do a thing called sewing with screws. Which is like with like thicker materials and belts. I will cheat. Instead of trying to like sew through 4 layers of ballistic weave or leather, I will just puncture a hole and put a bolt and then sand it down smooth.
Nice. But this is going to work.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like, how many people are going to know how to sew, but we know bolts attach things. Like it's attaching things, whichever way they will do it. I'm also like not confident enough in my sewing that once I get all this heavy stuff on there, that it's not going to rip. I'm a little bit more confident now. But yeah, it's, me explaining my process is also a bit of a beehive.
No, but I think that is, I think in really breaking it down the way that you have, it gives people like a sense of it. Even thinking of I'm trying to forecast it as almost like this version of storytelling and using the pieces, and that I've seen the pieces, and I'm like, oh, okay, that would make sense that this will be bolted because you need something that's going to stay together. And even if, in just kind of forecasting someone wearing this as in a actual scene or something, it's like, this could be ripped. A bolt is not being ripped apart like that. That's a little bit more work that's happening. So I think that this beehive aside, I think that you got it. I think that you gave it to us. So I want to ask you about tweaks. I think like when people get into their process, they always are doing tweaks. And I think sometimes it's important to like simplify like the work. Like, if I'm looking at this from the perspective of art, it's like, all right, all I need at this base level is some microphones and a place to record it and some type of interface. And to that end, I have been able to like really scale down what my gear looks like. Because I would imagine you have a background in audio. If you're having to bring your gear with you, it's just like, this is not going into a backpack. This is actual work. It's like a DJ bringing their stuff. So how do you align like your process or the things that you're doing to stay simple, to, from a question standpoint, like I was saying there, I need these things to get this end result of this product. What do you need, for, even if it's to get to the idea? Is it that one like kind of anchor piece? What is it for you?
Don't stay simple. I really don't stay simple at all. I am picking, I think what has been so fun about this is If you ever like look at Adam Savage's videos and you look at like his studio, you will notice just the sheer amount of different tools and different disciplines that he knows. And that has been, I've encountered a lot of that is I now know how to work with leather. I know how to tool leather. I know how to cut it, cure. I know how to work with leather. I now know how to hand sew. I know how to cut and bend and forge metal now, which are all things I didn't know 3 years ago. Just all these different things that I keep picking up. And I have the habit of anything new that I get any remote, like just the slightest twinkle of interest in, I go like full hog wild into it. Like I do not start off simple. The only thing that keeps me really grounded and keeps my studio from absolutely exploding is that I try really hard on the tool side to keep it as basic as possible, because if I start cutting things with a laser cutter, it's going to start looking sci-fi. It's not going to look right. If that makes sense. I try to keep my tools as basic as possible. Outside of a drill press, which I only use to get through the metal. And I typically will punch through as much as I can, but when I'm using the thicker stuff, I'm not Thor. I can only do so much. But I mean, the first few outfits that I made were made with can't remember where my camera is, are made with the first few outfits that I made were made with an awl. That has been the number one tool, is an awl, like a leather, sharp point with a handle. Yeah. A screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, and a blade, something to cut. That made and a way to sand the sharp edges on the metal. That made the first two costumes. Outside of, I think I had to use a drill at one point to get through some of the metal, but I had cut the metal with. It was the last time I ever did it with hand shears. I don't know if you've ever worked with like 26 gauge steel. It is not meant to be cut with hand shears at all. But I was so stubborn, and I didn't know how to cut metal. I didn't know what other better way. At that point, I was just stubbornly going through it.
This is going to work, damn it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started off with a lot of junk, like stuff to put together, but like my tools have actually remained very, very simple. To this day, the biggest thing taking up room in my studio is junk, the stuff that I, make the things out of, because there's just no cutting that down, because you never know what you're going to need. But yeah, I mentioned it in my thesis as well, that, part of this is keeping it as hand tool as possible, and keeping it realistic, not just, in the materials, but also in how I make it. That helps keep it simplified, because I try not to introduce materials that I can't work with. Right. So far, I haven't found too many that I haven't been able to work with, that would, reasonably be wearable. But yeah, I mean, that's why you won't see like a lot of really intricate metal cutting in my stuff. You won't see like etching in the metal, because I don't have the tools to do it. And I've made that part of it. I think with audio, there's always a better microphone. There's always something cooler out there. But I think keeping things simple in one aspect of it helps kind of also make like it's part of your signature.
Yeah, I mean, like. It's definitely making that connection to the audio piece where, I've told people, I was like, yeah, I could use this, I could use that. I have, Adobe and all of that different stuff. Fuse, GarageBand. I was like, kind of just prefer using the Behringer mixer and, using Audacity, if I'm being honest, to do it. And, oh my God, why would you use that? Why don't you have a Fast Track Pro or a Podcaster, or what is it? A Rodecaster rather. It's like, because I don't use those. And that's just kind of what it is. And I think sometimes that comparative thing kind of gets in the way, but I want to ask about that in a moment, but I want to ask you this. And I think this is, this would be like the penultimate question, if you will, before those rapid fire ones. Spread that successful people, like people who, and I deem successful people as people that are doing their stuff. They're making it happen. So including artists, entrepreneurs, what have you. There's one thing that whether it's emotion, whether it's skill that they've learned that kind of shines through and it drives them from doing whatever the next thing might be. What is that one thing for you?
So I think this is the one I knew was coming. I didn't know how to succinctly answer it, but I think so. I grew up on a farm, at a dairy farm, and from a very young age, I worked. That was just, I went out with my dad. I fed the calves because, they weren't going to run me over like a full-size cow would. And then on my mom's side, it was all, they were, my memo owned like a two dump trucking company, it was all, it was very hard work from day one. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was, it was this, and then I kept that through, I think, is one of the things that I always kind of fell back on, no matter how much crap I was feeling about myself, or whenever school was school was always a struggle. As much as, as much as I kept going back for more punishment, school was always hard. But I never, I never had to worry about, how do I explain this? Because it's not just work ethic. It's this it's borderline obsession. And it's, we're all our own worst critic. Yes. But then you get obsessed with something. And to the point where it's almost a problem. I think that's my ability to get interested in something. As soon as something has my interest, it has all my attention. It has all my time. It has, I will be at my studio and I will be on my feet for 6-8 hours and not realize I haven't sat down. The world will blur into the background. And I mean, a lot of people, I think, that do anything creative or have any kind of passion or anything like that will say the same thing. I always have that struggle of, I don't think I can do that. And then I get into this and it's been a lot of, well, it doesn't matter if I can do it correctly. I just have to, if I get part of the way there, it's enough. Mm-hmm. With this stuff, being distressed and being like that, it can be a little messy. It can be a little broken. And I think having a practice like this, where I'm very allowed to make mistakes, when I am a very obsessive person, not a perfectionist, but I'm very obsessive and in that regard, I think having a practice like this where I can make mistakes and I can keep making a thing has been really important, because I think if I continue, with audio, when I was editing audio, I could be up till 8:00 in the morning running different compression and different EQ, and it's still, and I know in the back of my head, it's still not as good as it could be. Right. But the show still has to come out. Right. And I think with this work is, it's, how do I put it? I don't get stuck on things as much. I mean, I will spend 3 hours on an inch of leather, making sure that I got that part right. But I won't, I won't bother myself that it has the same stitching work as somebody that's got, 20 years experience on me or something like that, because it doesn't need to be that. Mm-hmm. And coming from broadcast audio and stuff like that, where there are certain standards you have to hit. It's very nice that mistakes can be part of that, can be part of the final product, because we try so hard in so many different fields to hide our mistakes. And a lot of the times nobody knows they're there to begin with. Right. Only they're there to begin with. But I mean, with this work, mistakes are kind of on display. That hood, my crap stitching that I did for the first time ever was part of, how I got this pointy hat, this pointed look. Oh, I'm sorry. The hood one wasn't on display. Is this piece that's got a big pair of shorts as a hood. Yeah. And I had no idea how to sew a hood. So I just sewed it and it kind of made this big wizardy pointed, Gandalf looking thing. Yeah. And, I didn't know how to attach the hood. So I did it with 2 big bolts. And then I added USB cables that had beads on them to hide that. And so it's just this avalanche of mistakes is actually what the design is. It winds up being, I don't know if there was an explanation in there or not.
No. But I think part of it, with the aesthetic of what's being presented there, it almost feels like, no, a person is making this. So, if they're, let's say, if this was a scenario where this is an apocalyptic situation, this is going to be what it is, and I think that lends to the originality to it and the creativeness in that, because it feels real, even though it's something that is ultimately like fiction. Is something that comes from your mind, that's driven and, influenced by, what do I have around? What do I want to see? And I dig that, so yeah.
I think that you kind of hit on it. I think the hardest thing I had doing with this project when I was in grad school was calling it art. And I still struggle saying that I'm an artist now, because it's not like a matter of believing it. It's just like I've never identified as one. And I think that was the artist, where I think it became art was, little dumb things like using USB cables for beadwork, trying to combine a little, the quote unquote art part of it was these tiny little details. And I kind of have to thank the faculty, because the faculty and other students and people that came to see that were the ones that were defending my work as art more than I was. I had a theory in my thesis, it was, this work was ever present. I made this, and then the pandemic hit, and, felt very much like the apocalypse. Yeah. And then, I had this armor looking stuff, and then the insurrection happened, and now the invasion of Ukraine. It's constantly, it's unfortunately reflecting our world more and more. And people kept asking when I started this. And I think at the beginning, no one believed that I started this before the pandemic, right? Cause it was too timely. Unfortunately, nobody wants post-apocalyptic artwork to be timely. But yeah, I mean, I think that was, its relation to what's going on, and the fact that using these recognizable objects, like I'll hide things pretty well, and and there is some basic stuff on there, but there are objects that people will recognize in their daily lives. Yeah. And I think seeing those on these like grim, dark, distressed, dirty costumes, seeing that, the USB charger that they have their phone plugged into every morning, used that way, or their desk lamp using as a work light that's attached to somebody's shoulder. I think that was always like the eeriness of it, was the close, how close it was to everything.
I think we got it. I think we got that. I mean, even the comparison part, like I wanted to ask about that, but I think it's embedded in the answer. So that brings me to us getting to that those last few questions, those rapid fire questions that everyone loves. I don't care if they don't love them. I love them. Hence, everyone loves them.
I will try to give short answers.
No. These are kind of almost one word answers. So, what is your preferred mode of transportation?
Motorcycle.
I knew that was going to be an answer. That's why I asked it. What is a first world problem that you have?
Never enough personal time. Okay.
And lastly, what is your favorite drink? I may have read something about whiskey, but yeah, I think I'd ask you.
Johnny Smoking Gun. It is it's a whiskey out of Detroit. And it's phenomenal.
Okay. You've put Rob Lee on, so I'm going to have to try that.
Yeah. If you can find it, it's getting a little harder to find, but I'm not, I don't want to sound like a sponsor for them. I want people to buy this because I don't want it to go away. But no, definitely that. If not that, I went, anything with caffeine in it.
Okay. I've been on this vermouth kick. I just like vermouth now.
Just straight vermouth?
Yes. Yeah.
How?
I mean, I put a little seltzer in there sometimes to kind of do a little bit of a spritzer. I mean, I enjoy Japanese whiskey. Don't get me wrong, as I try to make my beard grow a little longer, but I do enjoy that. I had an interview a while back with Enrique Polaris from the Wine Collective, and he was just like, yeah, vermouth is great. And I was like, yeah, it is, isn't it? So I've just been hooked since.
Like dry or sweet?
Sweet vermouth, not dry.
Okay.
Never dry. Dry is poison. Get it out of here.
Yeah. I was gonna say, God, what? there are better things.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I've joked on occasion with some of my friends that might hear this. I was like, look, I drink a shot of whiskey as a pre-workout sometimes. So that's the type of guy I am at this point.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm definitely getting to that age where it's just like drinking hurts more than it is fun. But no, I mean, I've never even thought about just drinking straight vermouth. I was a bartender for a little bit. Yeah. I got asked to make a lot of weird drinks, but that never just like, hey, can I get a cup of vermouth?
Vermouth and black coffee. It's delicious. Sweet vermouth, black coffee. You'll thank me later. You'll thank me later.
Okay.
Yeah.
That.
It's delicious.
I'm too curious now. I'm too curious now to try it at this point.
Yeah. That might be the actual Rob Lee. I have a coffee drink that floats around. It's called the Rob Lee. That actually might be the Rob Lee.
Well, okay, I will try that. I think I might have some vermouth floating around at home.
Let's make it happen. So I want to thank you for being on this podcast, and I want to invite and encourage you to tell the fine folks where to check you out, where to follow you, and learn more about your work and all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Yeah. I'm terrible with social media management. I do have 2 Instagrams. I have my regular Instagram where I'm, it's motorcycles and other nonsense. But I do post a lot of my work up there. That's AD Motoberg. And then my actual real Instagram handle is Adam Droneburg Studio, DRONEBURG. That one I'm trying to get off the ground a little bit. I still have a website, adamdroneburg.weebly.com. That's still mostly just my audio work. Easiest way is just to keep an eye on Instagram. That's and around Baltimore. I try to put this, whenever somebody invites this work on display, I try never to say no. I try to be as generous with these things as I can. I lend them out to people because they're meant to be worn. Yeah. Every now and again, I see them pop up. From an event like a year ago, somebody took a picture of. Sorry, I'm not as findable as some artists. Like I said, it's my unwillingness to devote time to social media that is what it really is.
That actually is part of that first world problem. Not enough time and too much time being associated with social media.
Yeah, that's a problem I'm okay with having though. Yeah. That's if I'm not gonna have time for one thing, I'm okay with that. I still don't have a Twitter. Never had a Twitter.
So I'm going to wrap up there. I want to again thank Adam Droneburg for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee saying that there's art in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.